And I'm about to unpause the recording.
All right, I think I can officially call this meeting of the MAPC Executive Committee meeting to order. This meeting is being conducted remotely via Zoom video conference consistent with Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023. This includes an extension until March 31st, 2025 of the remote meeting provisions of former Governor Baker's Executive Order of March 12th, 2020, which suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. To provide public access to the meeting, while limiting the potential for abuse of video conferencing technology, members of the public may view the proceedings at https://www.youtube.com/user/MAPC Metro Boston. So to call the meeting to order, I will call the roll. I think we've successfully narrowed it down that I should be able to call the roll 3 times today. So to kick things off, who I think we have here, Colette.
Present.
Kurt. Present. Karen.
Here.
Adam, I'm here. Tom Daniel.
I'm here.
John. John DePriest. I don't think we do. Tom Galagani.
Here.
Diego Hueso.
Here.
Thank you, Diego. Shogun. No. Tabor.
Here.
Angie. Gina. There she is. Steve Olenoff.
Here.
Sandy.
Here.
Courtney. Vandana. Sam.
Here.
Steve Silvera. Juan Vega.
Present.
Elaine Vanya. Thought I saw Elaine. No, we lost her. And Erin Portman.
Here. Elaine's here as well. I don't think
there
her
you- there-
microphone's
there.
working. She's waving.
You can't hear her then.
All right, so this meeting is officially called to order. First item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from the April 26, 2023 meeting. We'll take the vote under the omnibus vote at the end of the meeting, but are there any comments, questions, or amendments in regards to the minutes? Okay, seeing none, we'll defer that vote till the end. Next item on the agenda is an update on hiring and staffing. Mark, am I turning that to you?
Yes.
Okay, take it away.
So this is actually very closely related to some of the choices that we are making in our FY24 budget, and which we will discuss more during Sam's report. There continues to be a lot of change at the agency. What we are seeing now is a little bit more in terms of departures of senior staff, as opposed to what we saw previously, which was departures of junior staff. Over the course of the last 3 months, I would say several directors, managers, and I think one assistant director have indicated that they will be departing MAPC for other jobs, in some cases other parts of the country. In 1 or 2 cases, there may be some ability to remain on in some capacity, perhaps for a limited period of time or a reduced number of hours. But we are seeing more turnover at the senior level than we saw previously. For the most part, this is not great because we have great people at the senior level at MAPC, and they bring a lot of experience, expertise, and relationships with our cities and towns and with other stakeholders. I suppose viewed from another perspective, we have said for a long time that the leadership of the organization has been extraordinarily stable, and we haven't had much opportunity to use it either to promote excellent, somewhat more junior staff into management levels, nor have we had the opportunity to bring people in from outside of the agency with fresh and new perspectives from other parts of the region or other parts of the country or the world. And this does offer us an opportunity to try and address some of those issues. It is a management challenge because every time one of those folks leaves, someone else needs to assume those responsibilities, at least for a limited period of time. And there are always the other challenges that accompany transition of, adequately downloading knowledge and experience, and perhaps putting that in the hands of someone who, at least for the moment, doesn't have quite the same touch and understanding that a person developed over a period of 5, 6, 10, 12 years. That is what we're trying to grapple with at the moment. Right now, we are, I think, in the closing stages of hiring a new director for community engagement. We are also entering an internal process to fill the position of Director of Municipal Collaboration. We are just starting to fill critical positions in legal and housing. And there are probably a few others that I'm not remembering right now, but we have brought on, she hasn't started yet, but we are bringing on an excellent Assistant Director of Transportation who is slated to start, I think, part-time in the summer and then full-time after Labor Day, I believe, because of childcare commitments. So, the good news is on more junior positions or more senior positions, we continue to get excellent applications. We're not getting the numbers that we used to get, but everyone in the labor market is seeing that. That's not us alone. You only need one person. You only need one excellent person to fill one position. Although here at MAPC, we often try and give one person at least 2 positions. So that's been holding steady. I have not been tempted ever in the last few years to offer a job to someone that I wasn't fully convinced will do an excellent job. So that's the good news, but it takes time. The process is not fast. It usually requires a lot of outreach and recruitment. We're actually seeking to expand and improve our recruitment efforts. That'll be part of the budget conversation. And in the meantime, it creates some instability at the agency and a challenge meeting our obligations to serve our members and to do the challenges that the Commonwealth places before us. You'll see in the budget a lot of holdover money into next year. I think we have holdover, if I recall correctly, of $14 million. That is more than our annual operating budget. It's not more than our annual operating budget plus pass-through. It's more than our annual operating budget. And one of the reasons for that is just a really great reason. There's lots of work that people want us to do and they're willing to wait. The other reason is that it's really hard to get everything done with the staff deficiencies that we have at the moment. And I'm sorry, deficiency might be the wrong word. I think you all know what I mean. It's not that the existing staff are deficient, it's that we have a lot of vacant positions. I appreciate the support that everyone in this screen is providing to us. I know that many of you look at and forward the job descriptions to friends and colleagues in the field. I ask you to keep doing that. We'll get through it. I think Lizzie and I always say we'll get through these things. But I want to be honest and open with you about the fact that it is a challenge at the moment. I guess I'll close by saying I've lost about 10% of my staff to my good friends Maura and Michelle. They owe me something. I don't know what it is, and they don't know when I'm going to collect, but I'm going to collect someday. So I just want you to know that. You listening? You hearing me, Diego?
Roger that.
Right.
Thank you, Mark. So do you want to take a
answer any
pause
questions.
before you get into the agency leadership? We'll take a pause here. Any questions from Mark about what he just shared? Okay. Looks like no questions, Mark. So why don't you shift into agency leadership discussion?
So we're continuing those conversations with the officers, directors, and managers. I think Lizzie and I probably have 2 conversations each day with other people about that. That's a lot of conversations. I advised the officers this morning, and I have not yet advised the staff, so I would ask you to give me the opportunity to do that. That at the moment, I believe, Lizzie and I believe, the best path forward for the agency in terms of leadership structure is to divide between the two of us overall responsibilities for agency management, somewhat similar, but not identical to the way that Rebecca and I used to do it. Rebecca was more entirely responsible for management, the management functions of the agency, plus a few departments, and then I had the rest of the departments. In this structure, I expect that I will be primarily responsible for the management divisions, and I think about 4 departments. It won't be more than 4. It could end up being 3. And Lizzie will be responsible for the remaining departments. At the next officers, I guess one thing that I will say, and this is also a little bit different, is that, Rebecca and I communicated a lot, talked a lot about key challenges. She talked with me about hers, and I talked with her about mine, but we sort of ran the parts of the agency that we oversaw somewhat independently. And Lizzie and I are committed to make major decisions about the agency, both from a management perspective and a substantive and policy, and planning this perspective a bit more as a team. I know that's what I want at this moment in time, and I think that's what she wants as well. It also means that we are not hiring additional deputy directors at this moment, although we both foresee the possibility in the future that we might want to move into that direction. There are substantive reasons for this. I will be honest with you. They are actually more budgetary reasons, and I'll get into that a little bit later, than they are substantive. The two of us, I think it's fair to say, work well as a team. We both have a similar perspective on some of the fundamental value related issues, but at the same time, we're good sounding boards for each other, and we take each other's advice to heart. So I think that's where we plan to go at the moment. And what I would like to do before finalizing this is, we've had 2 meetings with the officers on leadership structure. I would like to have another serious discussion with the officers about leadership structure on the first Monday in June. And then we will implement it. That will also give me and Lizzie an opportunity to communicate with our team of directors and let them know where we are headed. But it's fair to give you an update on this issue. I know a lot of you are thinking about it, and that's where we are at the moment. Glad to answer any questions. Also glad to see if Lizzie has anything she wants to add.
I'll just say I'm excited for the opportunity to be able to continue being a member of the leadership team. And, I think it's an evolving process, but I think this is the right place for us to be right now for the agency. And I think we've had a lot, like Mark said, a lot of conversations with our staff. I don't think they will be entirely surprised that this is where things are. And I think we've already made a lot of good progress in kind of helping them think through some of these changes. So I think they'll be supportive.
Great. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Lizzie. Questions for Mark or Lizzie?
Suggestions are also welcome.
All right. Yeah, the sign of a thorough presentation, Mark. Thank you. All right, so why don't we shift to the report of the treasurer? We'll take a look at the income statement for March and a review of the FY24 agency budget. So, Sam, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you, Adam, and hello to everybody. A lot of what you just heard about from Mark is also represented in the budget, and we'll go through some of those numbers. And if there's any questions or comments at that point, we can just have a discussion about it. But first, we're going to do the March income statement just to get a sense of where we are in this fiscal year and what's going on. You should receive that by email. I will only point to a couple of things. One is down at the bottom of the page, the line net income increase to fund balances at 106,000. The reason for that is that with interest rates rising, actually the money that we have that we put in the bank actually produces more money for us. And that represents a fairly large number for a single month. But that's what explains that number, is that the change in interest rates over the last couple of months has actually impacted our increase to fund balance. But probably more importantly to the actual income statement is the direct labor line, which is right about the middle of the page there going across. You'll see that that's at 115% for the month of March. That's above what we budgeted. That's above what we anticipated. And the explanation for that is that March has the most working days of any month that we've had so far, and there are no holidays in the month of March. So people actually booked a lot of time during that time. And our administrative expenses were pretty much right on budget. That has the effect, as we know, of driving down our overhead rate, which is what we're always tracking and always following. And so that put us at 104% for the month of March, and cumulative for the year at 116.8, so 117%, which is below the 121% that we approved. So the expectation is that as we close out this fiscal year, April, May, and June, that number will come back up. That overhead rate will come back up, because April is almost certainly not going to be like March was. And that's going to probably get us right to 121. We're obviously following that very closely, but that pretty much explains where we are or were as of the month of March. That concludes the report on the income statement, and would entertain any questions. If not, I think that goes to the omnibus vote at the end of the meeting. I'm not sure.
So Colette has her hand raised, Sam.
Yes.
It's not maybe too late to ask this, but I was just hoping you could have brought up the document when you're talking about it. I'm trying to.
Yeah, no,
talk.
fair enough. I think Anna, that was her goal or her intention, but I'm not sure if she's fully logged in yet. So
Are you a co-host, Anna? Or can Patrice make you a co-host?
Anna appears to be a co-host.
Okay. Then, Anna, you're muted. I'm not sure if Anna is.
I'm sorry, guys. I had some trouble getting to the meeting, and then my video was not working.
Okay.
So,
So Anna, are you able to bring up on the screen the February income statement?
March, the March.
I'm
one.
sorry, March.
yeah, if you just give me a second, please. I just have to go find it.
Sorry, no, I ran through that pretty quickly, but we'll be digging into the budget.
While Anna is looking for it, I would just note, if I could, Colette, that you know, we are constantly struggle to hit the overhead rate. And the only important number is what you hit on June 30th. But in the meantime, we've gone through a period of time back in the summer and to some extent the early fall when we were too high. The council decided to increase the overhead rate from 118 to 121 effective February 1st. Now, of course, we're too low. So we are working to adjust that and to make sure that our year-to-date numbers come in as close to 121. Well, actually, it's close to, I think it's 119.25, which is the merged total for the fiscal year, as possible. I think we're going to get there. But right now, we're kind of taking the pedal off the gas on overhead spending a little bit, just to make sure we can up those numbers. Anna and I just discussed that a few days ago. Anna, have you been able to locate the document, and could you share it?
Yeah, I want to try to share right now. Okay.
All right.
Okay.
So, yeah, please feel free to comment. Colette, this is what I was referring to. Direct labor right in the middle of the page for the current month. The raw number is 502,307, and the budget versus actuals at 115%. So we are above our budgeted number for the month. Whereas our total administrative expenses are at 99%, pretty much directly on par with what we expected. So that has the impact of driving down the overhead rate to 104.4. But as Mark was just saying, explaining, what we really care about is that cumulative at the end of the year So for the end of March, we're at 116.8%. Our target, I was going to say 121, but it sounds
Yes,
like
that is
Wow.
correct.
that is correct. Okay, 121%. So that's what we're aiming at, and as you probably can imagine, lots of energy is being put in. Colette, yes, you were.
Yeah, I just wanted to know, I don't think this was in our packet, so I did look at everything we had, but this wasn't in it. If we can get it in the future, that'd be great.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Yeah, I think you're right, Colette. I was so focused on getting you the 3 budget documents that I neglected to include the income statement. I always do. So my apologies for that.
All right. So with that, any other questions, comments? I think the vote on this will go to the omnibus vote at the end. And it probably would make sense to move on to the budget because there's a lot in the budget. And I'll have to yammer at you for a little bit longer. So with that, I would suggest we move on to the budget. And Anna, why don't we pull up the summary budget document, summary budget page, just to start the discussion, if that's okay.
Sam, would you mind if I set this conversation
No,
up?
please. Yeah, absolutely. No, handing it over to Mark.
Is it your intent to start with the overall summary page?
Well, what I thought I would
revenue.
do is just review some general numbers, some sort of big picture takeaways, dig into revenue, and then dig into expenditure. But please feel free to set the
So I'm
context.
just going to give some an overall perspective on some key issues. To my mind, at the moment, the single most important issue in this budget is sort of not how much money we have and exactly what we're spending it on and exactly where the revenue comes from, although all of those are important and they're all covered here. The most important goal is that we need to enhance the salaries, benefits, and professional development that are realized for our staff through our budget. The budget is the tool that enables us to do that. We are not currently as competitive in the marketplace as we need to be. There are ways in which I run this organization like a business, and there are ways I don't, but some of them, this is one of them, is that you have to be competitive in terms of the salaries and benefits that you offer, or you're not going to get the best people. And getting the best people is the most important goal, even more important than the number of projects we do, because I want all of the projects we do to be of the highest possible quality. Right now, our salaries, which have in the past, for many years, been a bit higher than usual or than normal, are not competitive with comparable positions in municipal or state government. And, you know, they're definitely not comparable with what people can earn working 80 hours a week for a consulting firm. But I'd like them to be 10% more competitive with those salaries. And we'd get that if we were comparable with municipal and state government. At the moment, I feel we are not. We also have a tendency to try and put people into more junior positions that we think are historically accurate, but which the market is not currently doing. I said to one of my directors yesterday that there is no more planner 1. You get to be a planner 2 right out of grad school. And I may not like that. It may seem silly to me, but we all live in the marketplace. And we have to be competitive with that. So, for example, it's easier for us to get planner 2s than it is for us to get senior planners, because the disequilibrium in terms of pay is greater there. Our benefit structure, similarly, was once well ahead of other places, but I think during COVID, it somewhat fell behind. One example of that, and it's not the only example, is that we provide 4 paid weeks of parental leave or any other FMLA leave. When we adopted that, that was very progressive. It is now rather backward. We need to provide more weeks of paid parental or FMLA leave, or we need to adopt the state system, which is 6 months. Now, it's a pay-in system, so it's very different, but it's 6 months of paid leave. So that is only one example of how our benefits need to improve. And although we provide a lot of funding for professional development, we could enhance the provision of professional development. Another thing, which is a case, is that for direct staff, by which we mean the vast majority of staff at MAPC who spend most of their time doing projects, they have historically needed to bill about 3/4 of their time to projects. And since most of the rest is paid time off, vacation, sick, etc., that left relatively little unprogrammed time to do other things, like work, answer a phone call and spend an hour working on an issue that a member raised, but that isn't directly related to a project and that we're not being paid to do. Or collaborate with your neighbors in another department to develop a new program or project. Or spend some time researching how the regional planning agencies in Seattle and Kansas City are solving a housing problem. There was just no way to bill to that. We need to increase that amount of time and to give our staff more freedom to do things that really do inure to the benefit of the agency and our members, but might not be billable to a specific project. Dealing with all of those issues, pay, benefits, professional development, and indirect time, are the core objective of everything we have done in this budget. We won't solve the problems through one budget alone, but it is my hope we can make substantial progress. And that will mean we have even higher quality people applying to the agency, and most importantly, staying at the agency for whatever this generation considers to be an appropriate period of time. I realize that we may have slightly different views about that, but if I can keep them for 5 years, I'd rather do that than 3 years. If I can keep them for 3 years, I'd rather keep them more than 18 months. Not everybody has to work 40 years like Martin has, but we do need to keep people for a longer period of time. So that's all I want to say. I want you to understand what the guiding star core objective of this budget has been, and that's it. Thank you.
All right, with that as background, I'm going to do my level best to walk you through some of the numbers. If there's any point at which I haven't quite described it exactly as Mark or Anna understands it, I hope they will jump in and correct or amend or add or whatever is needed at that point. But what we're going to do is we're going to start with a summary budget, just look at some overall sort of takeaways from this budget. Then we'll dig into the revenue side, and then we'll look at the expense side, all with Mark's description as the background. So keep that all in mind as we go through these numbers. So the big takeaways from this are, you'll look over at the top three lines, basically, in the right-hand column of increase and decrease. And I'll just go down the columns briefly. The left-hand column is what we approved at the mid-year last year, so about roughly 6 months ago. And then the middle column is the draft budget that's in front of us now. And then the right-hand column is the increase or decrease of that number. And if we start at the very top of the sheet, we see that we're in the revenue side and what we have to operate with. You'll see total revenue is up 23%, which in this budget is a number of $4.96 million. So from mid-year 6 months ago to this budget, we are looking at an increase of total revenue of almost $5 million. The general challenge, I think, as I understand it, and we've talked about both in the Finance Committee and in officers, is that there's a lot of work to do and not enough staff. That's a very good example. You'll see the next line down is what we often refer to as the pass-through money that comes in the door and then goes right back out the door. This is 3.3 million. It's up by 36%. It actually accounts for most of that 4.9 million. So of the 4.9, a lot of the money is going to be passed through. That being said, the next line down, net available for internal operations, $1.57 million is available to the agency to spend, hire staff, work on projects. This is an increase of 13% over what we were looking at just 6 months ago. That basically describes what the agency is looking at in addition to the benefits package. Other big takeaways. There's new hiring that's scheduled. If we look at just below that, we'll look at the direct labor line, and we'll see that there's an increase of 14% there from the mid-year. That is going to allow for, or that accounts for 11 new positions that are on the docket for hiring. So that's an increase of 11 new positions at the agency, and 8 positions that are going to be backfilled. People were in the job still exists. They have left the job, and those positions have to be backfilled. So that's about 20 either hiring, filling a position, or actual new hires. The next general point that I want to make is the point that Mark was just making. This sense that the agency has to continue to be competitive in the marketplace to attract and retain the absolute best employees. We all know MAPC employees, and we think they're wonderful. But to do that, a lot of effort in this budget has been spent to make this agency competitive with other places. We might see that under admin, labor, and employee benefits. That's going up 20% over the mid-year, right? So there's a big increase there. Other big points is that the fund balance is healthy. Interest income is also up, as we just noted in the March income statement. Interest rates have been rising, and that's actually generating more cash interest. And it leaves us at the very bottom of the page here at the overhead rate of 1.25. That is historically higher than what we've, those of us on the executive over the last bunch of years have been seeing. But that is a representation of this general effort to allow for employees to access other parts of their job other than just directly billing to a client. And that overhead rate is a representation of that. And it's our target for this upcoming year. With that, I think we just jump into just some revenue highlights. And what I'm going to do now is just try and give you an overall flavor of what's going on, and then we could take any questions, comments, discussion at that point with Mark and Anna available to fill in any specific details. But if we could switch over to the revenue page now, that would probably be helpful. So I'll pause while we do that. And maybe what I'll start by saying is that as we pull up the revenue page here, which is what you're seeing on your screen right now, basically, I don't know if you will remember, but in prior versions of this budget process, we would give you the very detailed, almost Excel spreadsheet that my predecessor, Tabor, would always point out has just gotten longer and longer and longer, more projects, more things to work on. We've decided for this project to give you a summary format, really condense all of that down. You rest assured all that detail is available, but we're not going to share that with you right now because we don't feel that it's particularly helpful for this discussion. What you'll see is the blue box is the mid-year, what we had for mid-year numbers. The orange, rose gold, whatever you want to call that middle box, is the proposed budget. Then you'll see obviously the increase or decrease in the green box, and then the reserve for future years is the white box in the right-hand column. Maybe I'll just start with the white box in the right-hand column just to point out the number that Mark pointed out, which is that about 14 million, a little over $14 million is reserved for future years. Those are multi-year contracts. Those are contracts we know we won't be able to complete in this fiscal year. That is a lot of work that's already on the books. But really what we're looking at is this transition from the blue box to the rose gold box. In the first column, we're looking at pass-through money. So if you look at the first column in each of those boxes, you'll see the increase, which represents the 36% increase that I mentioned before on the summary sheet from 9.5 million to 12.9 million. That's just over the last 6 months. So that I just want to give that scale over and over again, because it really is quite remarkable. The middle column here is what we have for internal operating revenue. That's the money we can spend for hiring staff, for working on projects. And there we see a 13% increase from 1206 to 13,635. So that's just over the last 6 months, we're looking at a 13%. And then the total increase, which I actually didn't write down my percentage number for, but we know that that's a 23% increase from the right-hand column in the blue versus the orange or the rose gold, for a total increase of almost $5 million, as we just reviewed. If you look at the bottom half of that page, so we've just looked at the boxes across the top, the bottom half is that $14 million we're looking in the out years. This is roughly how it breaks out to give you a sense of the kind of projects, the kind of things that are in the out years. This is not even in this year's budget. Mass broadband, the Good Jobs Partnership. Below that, we have public safety, public health, transportation, those sort of classic buckets of work that MAPC does. The federal highway monies in there. And then below that, arts and culture, climate resiliency. That's all work looking out over the years to come. That's not part of this budget that we're discussing now. With that, I'll just take a little breath. And my inclination would be to just keep going and to dig into the expense side, and then we could entertain questions, comments. So unless there's a burning question or comment, I'll just move us on to the expense side of the budget, if that's okay. So why don't we pull up the expense side? All right, so here, this is our expense sheet here. And we're looking at the indirect costs. So these are things that impact the overhead rate. And we're just going to look at the personnel, that top box, I call it a box. It's not the top category of things here. Admin salaries. And we're just going to look, if we look on the right, furthest most right-hand column, you'll see the percentage increases in each of these categories. And these percentage increases are exactly pretty much what Mark was talking about. The effort in this budget is to create a total package for an employee that makes MAPC attractive. It's already attractive because it's a wonderful place to work, but competitive with some other consulting firm or city or town government or state agency. And in these subcategories is exactly where that money is being directed. So in admin salaries, that includes a new hire on admin staff, but it also includes that increased time that direct staff can allocate to non-billable hours. So they have a phone call from a constituent, I'll call them a constituent, from a potential city or town. They just want to answer that. It's not a billable time, but they want to be a responsible employee, et cetera. All of that is contained in that top line. And you see there's a bump up of 10% in that number from the mid-year, from 6 months ago, to this budget that we're looking at. Right below that is employee benefits, that's including PTO, paid time off. And you'll see a very large increase there, a 35% increase from what we were looking at 6 months ago to this budget. And that is part of what Mark was talking about, that when MAPC went to a 4-week paid time off, that was pushing the envelope on the front end. Everybody else is now caught up with us and surpassed us. And so we're no longer on the competitive side of that question. And this is what we might view as an investment in that, so that an employee, whether they're an existing employee or a new employee, knows that they actually get more time off. And then the line right below that, professional development time, this has always existed within the MAPC budget. It used to be folded into employee benefits, but in this budget, it's broken out so we can see it very specifically. This is professional development time, as it would indicate, so that we can see exactly how much the agency invests in its employees already in terms of their professional development, and how much more this budget proposes to add to that, an increase of 18% for professional development. I'm just going to go down the sheet so we can go. I'll just keep walking down the sheet. The next broad category is benefits. So we're in personnel, broadly speaking, and then there's a benefits subcategory. The only thing I'll add here is the line just from the bottom, employee benefits improvement. That is a category that didn't exist before this budget. It's a placeholder of $44,000 additional dollars, again with the idea, and those might be spent some way, whether they're awards to employees or they could be any kind of thing. But it's again that subcategory of making the agency attractive and competitive across the board. You'll see both in the benefits subcategory and in the personnel broader category, in broad increases in benefits, it's 35%. Travel is travel. I think that's fairly self-explanatory. And then as we go down below, these are the numbers that we can predict: facilities, electric, et cetera, office furniture, insurance. These are our numbers with our adjustments for this year. I think the only thing I would point out here is the legal line, which is way down at the bottom. That's an increase of, almost a doubling of the legal fees. That is not because we are worried about some legal exposure anywhere. That is because we're now competitive for federal grants, and there's a lot more legal work that needs to happen with a federal grant. And that is reflected here with this increase in the money. And then just as we go down to other expenses down below, these are, I think, fairly self-explanatory. The only one I'll note here is the middle, right in the middle of that grouping is the strategic plan DEI assessment. You see that in this budget, that number has been zeroed out. That does not mean we are not doing that work. It means we are paying for that work through a different means, using assessment funds that will not work against our overhead rate. That leaves us with a total expenditure down at the bottom of 7,488,810, an increase of 1,109,015, or 17% increase in total expenditures. And again, when we look at our revenues, our expenditures, and our overhead, that leaves us with an overhead rate of 1.25. As you might imagine, Mark and Anna and Lizzie and the whole team have spent a lot of time on this. The Finance Committee has reviewed this, and we voted it out with a favorable recommendation of the Executive Committee on the 18th of May. And it is before you for your consideration, and our hope is that we would get a favorable recommendation for this budget for FY24 to the full council for the full council meeting. That concludes the budget report. I would entertain any discussions, comments. Mark and Ann are both on the call for any very detailed comments, questions, etc. But I'll open up. Colette, I see Colette. Maybe we could go back to screens now and not have our sheets in front of us. I see Colette's hand is up.
Yeah, just a couple of questions. Mark mentioned that we are trying to be competitive with federal, other municipalities, etc. Can you specify who you see as your peers? So when you're trying to benchmark this to see, okay, we need to be able to compete with X town, X city, or X department within whoever it is that you're competing with. so that you're pitching these increases at the right level. Can you specify?
Yes, Wellesley specifically.
Don't take
It's always been
anyone
a problem. It's always been.
No, it's not. We don't compete with any particular community. It's just that our salaries do need to be competitive with planning staff. Generally, it's planning staff, not exclusively, at municipalities in Eastern Massachusetts.
Okay.
And honestly, we tend to compete with, also with New York, with Washington, D.C., with, places like that. What we call the major metros, the other big city planning agencies around the country. We also need to be competitive with state agencies. I don't think we need to be particularly competitive with federal agencies. It's such a different kettle of fish. We don't often see too much crossover of people trying to decide, am I going to work at a regional agency or am I going to go work for the feds? That doesn't happen as often. But we need to be reasonably competitive with state and municipal governments. And both of those salaries in Massachusetts have gone up substantially. And in some cases, the benefits are more attractive.
I think the other thing I just note, there are some entities where we know we can't be competitive. So some of the quasis in the Commonwealth are really, we can't compete with those salaries. And so when we are doing that benchmarking, like Mark said, we are really looking at the state agencies, and not all cities and towns. There are certainly cities and towns in our region and outside of it that are just a lot higher. So we couldn't necessarily benchmark against those, but I'd say kind of throughout the region. And we do sort of look at a range of different positions because, like Mark noted, I'd say about 20% of our staff now are not planners. And so we're not just looking at planning firms.
But this brings you back to competitive. So the 35% in benefits is kind of what you're behind, and then a little bit to make you more competitive. Okay.
Well, yeah, I think it's going to help us with both salaries and benefits.
Yeah.
I would not want to go so far as to say it will complete the task of bringing us on par, but it will help us substantially in both of those areas.
I saw Tom Daniel had his hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Sam, for walking us through all that. And I just want to say, I think it's great that you're looking to create some time for not being billed to projects for staff to work on other things. I think that's a great addition this year. I had the same question Colette asked, and also another one that we've run into, and I'm wondering if you're facing this and if you're addressing it as part of this compensation. This is about salary, not about benefits, where you have an incumbent, that's been there for a couple of years. Their parallel position is then advertised at this new rate. And that new rate, that base compensation in the new rate is actually higher than what the incumbent is making, or is just comparable after the incumbent's been there for a couple of years. I don't know if you're facing that, and if you are, if there's any sort of thought about how those incumbents' salary is addressed.
So that is an issue. Again, I'll tell you what my philosophy is on it. We live in the real world. I've hired people during recessions, and I've hired people when the market is hot. And not everybody's going to be on par. It's not possible. We give our raises based on merit. There is a standard raise that almost everybody gets, but then there are special raises that are based entirely on merit, the accomplishments of that person in the course of the past year. Sometimes we have to hire, if the market is very competitive, at salaries that are somewhat higher than what we're paying to comparable incumbent staff. That having been said, over a period of several years, I will try and bring people up so they are more on par. Whenever, and I'm going to have this conversation with a prospective hire in just probably the next hour or so. I explained to people that we tend to be conservative in our initial salary offers, mainly because we try and attain equity across our staff as much as possible, but that this is an agency that has given people raises every single year for the past 20 years, always with only 2 exceptions on the 1st of July. And generally, a third to a half of the staff can expect a special raise every year. But you know, I'm going to make an offer today and the person wants me to go a little higher and I'm not going to go a little higher. And that is about trying not to get that person out too far ahead of comparable staff in that department, in other departments. The last thing I will say is every year we review our salaries from an equity perspective across protected classes. There is zero tolerance for a lack of equity across those classes. If we think there is an anomaly that manifests itself across race, across gender, across ability, as it were, or other things, then we must correct that every year. But I do not feel the need that every plan or two is paid exactly the same thing, or something like that.
Yeah, no, understood. Thanks, Mark. One question just on the merit increases. Are those done in July as well with the base adjustments? Okay.
Yes, now lately we've started giving some raises in January as well.
Yeah.
Yours truly is not particularly happy about doing that because I know that the more exceptions I give, the more, I'll get 20 people asking for raise in January because it was 10 last year, or I'll have people suddenly deciding that April is a great time for a pay raise. So I try to keep them mostly to July 1st, the fiscal year. But even if, it works in both ways. If we can't quite finish the raise package by, say, until August 15th, those raises are all still retroactive to July 1st.
Yep. I will just note, so last year, Tom, we did actually, when we did that, because like, as Mark said, we do this analysis every single year with our salaries. And so last year, as we were doing our raise analysis, we actually realized we were really running into this place where we were posting things higher. There was sort of this like gap. And part of that was like pandemic salaries actually had been slightly artificially lower. And then there was a big bump kind of halfway through. And so we did do a lot of those adjustments last year. Some of them were equity adjustments. Some of them were just truly a salary adjustment. And Angela, who I don't think is on the call today, has this enormous spreadsheet with like 1,000 columns that kind of indicate how somebody's raise is calculated so that we have a very clear sense of how that raise kind of falls for our structure on an internal perspective. But we do absolutely look at it every single year. And I am not as worried about the January mid-year adjustments as Mark is. So we balance each other out for that.
Great. Thank you both. Appreciate it.
All right. I don't think I see any other hands. I assume we would take a vote on this, Adam, now on hopefully a favorable recommendation to the full council.
Sam, what I would suggest is if anybody objects to this being on the omnibus, we'll take a vote now. But if there is no objections to having this on the omnibus, we'll put it in the final vote.
That is fine with me.
And to be clear, the vote will be recommending approval to the full council.
Yes. Favorable recommendation. Yes.
Favorable recommendation.
Yeah, right.
Any objections? Okay, seeing none.
And I just give a huge thank you to Anna and to her staff, to Sam, Yolanda, and Tabor. This year's budget required an exceptionally, it was a larger amount of work. It was a heavier lift than usual. And it's always a heavy lift. And I want to give all of them, but especially Anna, a tremendous thank you for the work.
Yes, I'm going to add
Thank
that.
you, Mark.
Anna helps me understand this much more than I otherwise would. So thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Anna and team. So, Mark, I know you have to go in a moment, so why don't I turn to you for some brief other business, and then we'll get back into the rest of the agenda.
Right. I had two things I wanted to do, and folks, if you'll pardon me, I'm going to have to disappear at 12:30 to open a webinar on EDA funding, which John DePriest correctly pointed out conflicted with this meeting. And John and others, we have taken steps to now prevent this from happening in the future. These conflicts between municipally focused events and our executive committee meeting. But we couldn't change this one. So I'm going to have to take off about 5 or 10 minutes and then I'll come back. I have a few items under other business, but I think that could probably be handled when I come back at this point. Okay. And they are quick ones. So you can do legislative and all the other items while I'm gone, and probably won't finish them by the time I come back.
Great. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
All right, so why don't we jump to item number 5, report of the Legislative Committee. Keith, do you have an introduction to do before we turn to?
Sure. Thanks very much, Keith Bergman, non-voting past president and chair of the Legislative Committee. And first, I want to take this opportunity. We don't say it enough. Government Affairs team, best anywhere. We're well served by Leah Robbins and her team, especially at all year long, but especially at this busy time when so much activity is happening on Beacon Hill. The Legislative Committee met on May 10th. We got briefed on what's happening with the budget, and but we do not have any specific recommendations to bring forward for votes of the Executive Committee. Nevertheless, there's still an awful lot that's happening. We haven't discussed it, and I'm not taking sides with my state senator, Mike Barrett, on how legislative committees should be structured, jointly or not. But it's never a dull moment. So I appreciate all the work that MAPC is doing, and happy to hand it over to Leah Robbins.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Keith. I will pass that along to Georgia and Matt. No, I don't think they're both listening in, so I'll pass that along. It is a busy time. I want to give you a little rundown of where we are with the budget and where we are with bills being heard, and then open to any questions. So on budget, the Senate is literally debating the budget as we speak. I've been flipping back and forth on my screen. The funding for the Shannon program is still in play. We are hoping that later today they will take up an amendment that would increase funding for the program. Not yet back to our historic high from before the recession, but to a much higher number. So we're waiting to see exactly where the negotiation goes. I think our sponsor is going back and forth with Senate Ways and Means staff to arrive at a number that works. We were incredibly excited to see, I think I put this in the email to you guys, that this is the first year in my memory that Senate Ways and Means has ever funded the District Local Technical Assistance Program. And they not only funded DLTA at level funding, but they also included funding for regional planning agencies to work with municipalities on federal grant applications. So we are really excited to see that come through. We're still working with the Senate to see if we can add in language so that, like we're doing this year, regional planning agencies are able to also help cities and towns on those state applications that we see as so critical for being able to tee communities up for being ready for federal programs. So that is still in progress for us. In a more global picture, the Senate and House both put forward really strong budgets for housing priorities, for climate priorities. Obviously, we're still going to ask for more. We're really excited that legislators have been really keen into a lot of the priorities that Metro Comment laid out. I will say Chapter 90, not budget related, but a bill that deals with money, Chapter 90, which I know many folks on this call care very, very much about, still has not passed to the governor's desk for her signature. Each branch passed the bill and included that same annual funding of $2 million a year, but put forward 200 million, don't worry guys, and included 150 million in other programming like the small bridge program and other similar programs, but the House and Senate differed as to which other grant programs they wanted to fund. So we're not exactly sure where that's going to shake out. It has been a considerable amount of time since the bill started to move. That was early in the spring that started. So we're continuing to work with legislators and with our colleagues at other organizations that care very deeply, like MMA, to see if there are ways we can be supportive of moving that legislation along. On hearings just earlier today, Georgia testified before the Telecom Utilities and Energy Committee, the House version, on our TNC legislation, and she'll be testifying tomorrow for the senators. So we are very much trying to make sure our priorities get heard, however the committees are meeting. Which it adds an extra wrinkle, but we're here to testify, make sure people hear what communities are dealing with. And we testified last week on a panel in support of flood-related legislation that ties directly into research and reporting that MAPC is doing. So we're really, it's definitely firing on all cylinders right now. And I'm sure you can hear Matt in the background having a conversation with other staff. So we are a full house here in government affairs, trying to make all things happen. So I'm going to leave it there, just a really quick update. And if you have questions on the budget or other legislation, please let me know. Glad to help.
Thank you, Leah. That was a great update. Took me a second to figure out where the background noise was coming from. I was looking at the little participants list. Any questions for Leah? Okay, seeing none. Thank you. Excellent work. All right, so now we'll move to reviewing the plans for the annual council meeting, which is now a week away, and the elections in May as well. Lizzie, you taking that?
I am glad to. So yeah, the council meeting is just a week away. We have a number of business items that we take up. We'll have to take up, most of which you actually approved us to bring to council next week. So all those budget pieces, we also do have to get approval for our borrowing authority. So that will come up at council meeting as well. Lieutenant Governor is actually kicking off. So she'll be our 9:30 keynote. And then we also have our Legislator of the Year award, and that is Rep. Adrian Madero. And then we have a Legislative Staffer of the Year award. We're really excited to be able to give that this year. I think I mentioned this before. So it's Christy Ghetto-Young in Senator Sal G. Domenico's office is receiving that award. She's actually also been nationally recognized, but she wrote like a deeply heartfelt thank you when we let her know of the award. In addition to all of those things, we also have elections. So we will be doing our elections as our caucuses for executive committee. So those of you who have not yet, please indicate on your nomination forms for executive committee to make sure that we can have full slates for those elections. We do obviously take nominations from the floor. I know some of you who are not able to be there have already started reaching out to other members of your caucus to ask for their vote on the day of, and those will be facilitated caucuses. And then we will do our election of officers as well. I think that is the full, it'll be a pretty packed day. It's a very cool space too. So make sure you get there at 9 so you have a chance to kind of mingle and enjoy the space. And the Lieutenant Governor, who often runs late for those of us who know her well, indicated she'll be there at 9 and she'll be speaking at 9:30. But I think if folks get there like just a little after 9, you'll actually catch a little time with her. We are also going to have our photographer there for the day. And so, which has been a long time because it's our first in-person council meeting in a really long time. So, I think the new pictures of me will actually have the full complement of gray hair by this council meeting.
I just want to say,
did you mention the need for quorum?
Yeah, we're getting very close on quorum, but for those of you who have not registered, please do. There's a very good chance that on Monday of next week, I will be reaching out to you to ask you to reach out to members of your caucus to just help with that like final, get us over the line on quorum push to get people to register. We're pretty close. Yeah. Sorry, Leah, I know you're trying to jump in too.
No, I just want to say I'm really excited to honor these nominees, and it was on my notes to mention them. Rep. Vargas has been an incredible champion for the Shannon program and for so many things that we've worked with for so many years. And Christy is just like truly the nicest person you've ever worked with and cares so deeply about making this whole region better. It's an incredible kickoff to an award that there are a lot of great staffers we get to work with, and she really rises above. So yeah, I think it's really wonderful, and I'm so excited that we have this space on the council meeting for you guys to get to see some of the awesome people that make legislation happen in the region.
And I'm going to be the person that's pushing on quorum. I need you all to be there because if we've never, it's been 3 years since we tried to make quorum at an in-person meeting. And to be perfectly honest, in the pre-COVID times, we just wouldn't worry about it unless someone questioned the presence of a quorum. And right now, we're being told we can't do that anymore. We actually need to achieve quorum, and we just have no idea how we're going to do with an in-person meeting. So please, please, please try and be there. Otherwise, you're all going to be subjected to a special meeting that I'll have no choice. I need to have a budget for next year. So not to mention, we need to elect a board.
I do, just looking at the list very quickly, I think most of you already get an A for having registered, which is great. But you actually also have to show up. So make sure you're there.
Will there be coffee?
So much coffee, always
Perfect.
coffee.
That's all we need. That's all we need.
There'll be food too.
Coffee, there's food. Yeah, it's going to be great.
All right. Thank you for that update. I'm excited. I'm excited to go see the space too. It sounds like a great.
It's very cool.
facility that you're holding it at.
I will just note parking is not easy there. Folks kind of know the area, so take the T.
Great. All right. So any questions about next week's meeting? Okay, seeing none, why don't we do our deferred votes and then we'll have time for Mark to cover the items that he wants to cover before we adjourn. So
The
for
only
our,
thing is, one of the items is going to require what I think could be a deferred vote.
all right, the flip-flop, you go.
Okay.
You go
Sorry.
first. It's okay.
I'll just do that one. Then we can take a vote before people leave. We neglected to do the annual vote on renewing borrowing authority. We probably should have done it at the winter council meeting, but we didn't. So I think most of you know what this is. Under Chapter 40B, Section 8, MAPC is allowed to borrow money in anticipation of assessment revenues. We very rarely do it, but we need to have the council extend to us for the fiscal year the authority to do so, should it become necessary. And so I am asking for a motion that the executive committee should recommend to the council that it extend borrowing authority to fiscal year 24 in accordance with the provisions of MGL Chapter 40B, Section 8.
So make that motion.
Second.
All right, do you want me to take a separate roll call, Mark?
I think we can now do the deferred votes, if it's okay to include that in the deferred votes.
Sure. So let's do this. We have an approval of the minutes from April 26, 2023, an approval or an acceptance of the income statement from March 2023. We have a recommendation of favorable action to the full council on the FY24 agency budget. And we have a recommendation of favorable action on borrowing authority to the full council. So can I get a motion on all four of those again?
So moved.
I want to give Karen the motion and did Gina second it? Well, the minutes are going to say that you both did. Any questions, comments, or concerns on the motion? Okay, seeing none, I will call the roll. I think we don't have Colette, so we'll start with Kurt.
Yes.
Karen.
Aye.
Adam, I vote yes. Tom Daniel.
Aye.
John.
Yes.
Tom Galagani.
Aye.
Diego. You still have Diego?
Sorry. Aye.
Thank you. Tabor.
Yes.
Gina.
Aye.
Steve Olenoff.
Aye.
Thank you. Sandy.
Aye.
Sam.
Yes.
Juan.
Aye.
Elaine.
Aye.
And Aaron.
Aye.
Motion carries. All right. Thank you. All right, Mark, was there other business you wanted to raise as well?
Yes, I have sent to you the executive director's report, but I neglected to put executive director's report in the agenda. I'm only going to do a couple of quick highlights, but I wanted to note with excitement that the executive director's report is only 11 pages long this time. As you know, it's gotten to 20, 22, 24, 28. It's been a little ridiculous. This month, partly by accident, we asked each department to come up with only 2 to 4 major accomplishments in the course of the last several months. And they did that. And it resulted, I think, in a more accomplishment-focused executive director's report. Fewer of the accomplishments are holding a meeting or generating a map, even though those are things we love to do. I'm not sure they always need to be in the executive director's report. And it is also shorter. So we may find a way to do this going forward. I would like to note just a few things. First of all, the release, really two things. The release of two incredible reports by MAPC staff on industrial land and on stormwater impacts are both groundbreaking reports. They were excellent webinars held on both of those topics. A lot of coverage on those issues. I think particularly the stormwater one. MAPC work does not often get the front page of the Globe above the fold, which still matters to people like me who get their hands dirty in the morning reading the newspaper. We got a lot of attention on social media as well for these two reports. And already in both areas, we're working on follow-up. So it's not just do the report, do the research and get the information out. It's figure out what we can do to put those findings to work. The other thing I'd like to mention is a really big opportunity for the Clean Energy Department and the Environment Department working together, and other departments will be involved, certainly community engagement. And that is that we have been awarded, or we are about to be awarded, but we're the only eligible competitor, I believe, for the Carbon Pollution Reduction Grant from the EPA. This grant is made available to regional entities to do regional plans on carbon reduction, which will then make municipalities and regions eligible to apply for an additional $4.6 billion of investment in reducing carbon pollution throughout the country. Again, fingers crossed that nobody's going to claw those monies back. We will be getting $1 million for this project, but $1 million not as much as it sounds like, because we will be working with other regional agencies in Massachusetts and New Hampshire, because the geography is the MSA, which goes all the way up to southern New Hampshire and constitutes 188 communities. Julie Curdy, our Director of Clean Energy, is leading this effort. Lizzie and Leah and many other people at the agency are deeply engaged in it. I expect it to be one of our major tasks over the course of the next, I think it's actually 2 years. A preliminary report is required at some point, and then a final report is required in 2 years. And we're working very closely with the state, including with Catherine Antos, who used to be here for a short moment. We are working very closely with them on the regional plans throughout the state. Our colleagues, the Worcester MSA at the Central Mass Regional Planning Commission, are doing one of these, and the state has $3 million to do its own plan. Since the state already has a climate reduction plan, a carbon reduction plan, they'll really be using the money to add detail and implementation steps to that plan, which we think will be great. Those are some highlights from the ED report. And I think that's it.
Thank you, Mark. Questions for Mark? All right, seeing none, does anybody else have any other business not known at the time of the posting on the agenda?
I believe our next meeting in June will be an in-person meeting at the invitation of the mayor of Peabody and Kurt. So we will be meeting in Peabody in June.
Sounds great. Tom.
Yeah, Adam, this is just something I wanted to share with the group, and Tom Galligani with Somerville has been part of this with us in Salem the past year. There was some press about this a couple weeks ago. So the mayors of Boston, Lynn, Somerville, Cambridge, and Salem signed what's being called the Commonwealth Development Compact. This is an effort led by the Civic Action Project with participation by the Builders of Color Coalition, the Boston Society for Architecture, and funded through a grant from Eastern Bank Foundation. So the 5 cities are committed to this 1-year pilot program. The goal is looking at the development process, particularly the private sector development process, to advance DEI and looking at DEI goals in that industry. So we are We've agreed that in municipal dispositions, which Salem doesn't do a heck of a lot of those, but that we would have DEI goals, roughly about 25% of the evaluation criteria related to DEI goals. But when we're working with private sector developers, that we're having conversations with them about what they might be considering in that space, and then having a voluntary submission that they make to us that then will be compiled. So just wanted to let folks know this is not exclusive to these 5 communities. There's opportunities for other communities to join on. And then in about a year's time, we'll be reporting out.
That's great, Tom. Thank you for sharing that. Should anybody interested in a dialogue contact you, or who should they reach out to?
Yeah, they can contact me and I can make the connections from there.
Great, great. Any other new business? All right, seeing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Give you 5 to 7 minutes back.
So moved.
Second.
All right, made by Tom, seconded by, I didn't see who said it, but I'll give it to Kurt. And I think Kurt, you're the first one. So Kurt.
Aye.
Karen.
Aye.
Adam, I vote aye. Tom Daniel.
Aye.
John. John DePriest. Oh, you're on mute. I'll give you the aye. Tom Galligani.
Aye.
Diego.
Aye.
Tabor.
Aye.
Gina.
Aye.
Steve.
Aye.
Sandy.
Aye.
Sam.
Aye.
Juan.
Aye.
Elaine.
Aye.
And Aaron.
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Got a lot done. Enjoy the rest of the week. Bye-bye.
See y'all next week.